Hey, you guys. Today, you guys are going to be starting your next unit on solving quadratics. So it's going to still feel kind of familiar to what we were doing before because we're still going to look at graphing compared to your solving equations and stuff. But this time around, we're going to focus a little bit more on the solving and a little bit less on the graphing. So depending on what you prefer, might be a good thing. But either way, we're going to learn a couple new strategies for solving. For those of you that weren't big fans of having to do all the factoring first, you're no longer going to have to do that. So today's method we're going to introduce is the quadratic formula. And some of you might have heard of the quadratic formula before, is my guess. It's a pretty popular method of solving quadratic equations. But if you haven't, the quadratic formula is meant to be able to solve any quadratic equation in standard form. It doesn't matter if it's factorable or not. So when we're looking at our quadratic equations in standard form, instead of having to factor them, you can use this formula. The catch, you do have to know how to use the formula. So that's our goal today. Okay, here we go. So hopefully you remember what standard form looks like. I'm going to have you warm up with slides 1 to 2 on the Desmos activity. So I know it just says slide 2. You're going to actually do slides 1 and 2 for your warm up for today. So go ahead and pause the video really quickly. Go warm up with those 2 slides just to remember about standard form and all that good stuff. And then come unpause the video and return and we'll continue on. Okay, welcome back. So standard form means that we need all of our terms on one side of the equal sign. Be sure you're writing this onto your notes page so that you have personal notes to take home with you and use on your homework, okay? So if that's the case, when we're looking at a situation like this, the reason that it's not in standard form is because that's 7 on the right side of the equal sign. We don't want it there. That is not considered standard form. We need all of our terms together on one side. So in this situation, since the majority of the terms are on the left side, then we're going to want to move that -7 to the other side of the equal sign. And you guys know how to do that. You've been solving equations for a while now. So add or subtract it to the other side depending on what the original sign was. So in this case, we would need to subtract the 7 from both sides of the equation. Once you do that, you end up with your equation being equal to 0, which is exactly what you want, because then you're set up for solving. Remember that we can use in factoring the zero product property where your 2 factors had to be equal to 0. It's the same idea. We want our equation equal to 0 every single time so that we can solve. Okay, so just keep that in mind. I start it for you. It has to be equal to that 0. Okay, once you've got your equation set up, then you can go through and start identifying the parts. And what we do is we look for the coefficients of each term. So A, B, and C values are the coefficients, the numbers in front of the x's. And remember your last term, the constant, there is no x. So that's just, it's x to the 0. So the number you see, the constant number, is your coefficient. Okay. You have a reminder there in your notes. Remember, if there's no visible number, it is a 1. So that's why the b value in the middle of your example is a -1. I think you are ready to make sure that you understand how to find A, B, and C and what standard form looks like. So before we investigate the actual formula, let's make sure that you can identify your coefficients correctly. So we have a quick check here. identify the A, B, and C values for the equation, and it literally is exactly as it sounds. So from this first term is where I would identify that A is -2, the number in front. From the second term is where I would identify that B is a +1, the number in front of the X. Remember, it's invisible. There's one X there. And then C, the coefficient of my last term, is just the number you see. It's your constant number of -5. Okay? You guys should now take a turn to go try this out on your Desmos activity. So go back over to your Desmos activity, pause this video, and try to do slides 3 through 5 and show me that you've learned this. And come back when you're done. Okay, hopefully your quick check went okay. It's pretty easy to identify the three coefficients for your formula. The slides are also introducing you to the actual formula itself. So you can see right below in this quick check area, here is our quadratic formula. And there are so many ways to be able to learn the formula and remember it. We're not going to make you memorize it, but it's helpful to try to remember it if you can, if you don't want to look it up all the time. In the Desmos activity, there was a video there for Pop Goes the Weasel, and there was a story to help you remember it. And then on these notes pages, there's also a video for a different one. It's another song one that's Rolling in the Deep by Adele, if you wanted to watch that one. I'm not sure, in the video you can't click on it, but if you go to the link that I share on Google Classroom for your notes pages, you should be able to click on it from there if you're interested in watching that one. Okay, so the formula has been created so that we're finding our two x-intercepts on the graph. Remember, we're looking for roots. There, we take the square root in the quadratic formula because we're solving for roots. So let's think about our vocabulary that we've learned. Solutions are the same as x-intercepts are the same as roots when we do the quadratic formula, and when we do the zero product property are the same as zeros. All those words are interchangeable. You can see why it gets so confusing for some students. So today, when we look at the quadratic formula, we usually talk about quadratic formula solutions as roots because it has the square root in the formula. So that's kind of what we tend to do. But any of those words can be applied, so don't be frantic if you see a different question being asked. If it sounds like they're asking you for something different, any of these mean the same thing. Okay. On the following slides in the Desmos activity, you're going to practice using the quadratic formula a little bit to solve your quadratic equations. There are slides on there that have you go through and just practice filling in the numbers. And there are slides in there that have you actually work on finding solutions. So we're going to go through, and here's some of your vocabulary there as well. You've got all your different vocabulary. We're going to go through and practice just filling in the numbers. I'll show you on the Desmos Scientific Calculator, and then you'll get a chance to work on it on your own as well. So let's set this up. I'm going to have you do the Desmos problems afterwards, although if you've already done them, that's okay. You could just kind of check your work. If you're doing this, start with your A number, your B number, and your C number. And then you're going to need to drop them into the formula where they go in the appropriate place. So when you're doing this, you probably need the formula in front of you. So if it's on your notes page, you might need to flip back and forth, or you could have it open on your computer. But we've got -b, so the b goes here, plus or minus the square root of b squared, so 3 squared, minus 4 times a times c, all divided by 2a. So if you drop all the numbers in the correct placements, this is what it would look like. It's really not hard to use the quadratic formula, but I'm going to be honest, you need to be really careful. Students make mistakes on this all the time. So I'm going to give you a warning. Be careful with your negative signs and your parentheses. If you're using your Desmos Scientific Calculator like we teach you and you've got that formatting down, then it should be nice and simple. You guys have gotten really good at using it, those of you that actually do and practice with it. Those of you that don't, you're going to want to probably use it because it makes this so much easier. Okay, let's go talk about how we can use the calculator to get our answers, because from here, you don't have to do any more work. So in your Desmos in your Desmos calculator, you need to type in that equation exactly as you saw it. So negative b, and we purposely wrote it with parentheses so you could follow this. When you get to the plus or minus sign, you have to choose. It doesn't do both answers at the same time. We don't do that in a calculator. So I'm just going to choose the plus one. And then from there, you can continue the formula. So the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c. And then to make the whole thing go over the 2a, you need to highlight it and then use your division symbol to create that fraction. If you don't highlight it, it'll only put just the second part with a fraction, and you need to make sure the entire numerator has that fraction. And then that's going to be your 2a. So just be careful in this setup. If you set it up correctly like this every time, you won't have any issues. Okay, let's see here. We've got 3, 1, and negative 4. So we've got 3 for our B's, 1 for our A's, and negative 4 for C. Beautiful. Answer is 1. Remember, that's only one of your answers. So once you're here, take a minute and go write down your answer. X equals 1. Yay. Remember, that's an x-intercept for your graph. So this is another way to find your x-intercepts other than factoring. I have a feeling most of you guys will like this better than factoring. Okay, let's do the other one. Now we need to go back here and change that to a minus sign. Remember, you had a plus and a minus. We've talked about that when we started with our root work. You have to have both answers. So when you use the minus sign in the numerator, then we get a negative 4 for our answer. And that would also be an x-intercept of the graph of this quadratic. So if you were to go graph it, you can always go type this into the Desmos graphing one if you just wanted to see it and check that it actually does give you these two x-intercepts, go for it. But other than that, you're done. So I hope you guys will enjoy the quadratic formula and what it can do for you. The formula looks scary, but it's actually quite simple once you work with the calculator and get it set up with your parentheses the right way. Okay, so let's do this second one together just for one more round, and then I'm going to have you go practice on the Desmos activity slides to see if you could do this on your own. Let's see. For the second problem, we have A is 2, B is negative 7, and C is 3. So if A is 2, everywhere you see an A in the formula, you're going to write a 2. And it's kind of helpful with colors because I'm matching which numbers go where. So it might help you guys if you use different colors in this too. Everywhere you see B, it's negative 7. This is where those parentheses really become important because those negative signs, notice in the very front, having 2 negative signs there, that's going to make a big difference. So you have to be very careful that, like I said, with your negative signs, with the formula signs, and with the parentheses. Otherwise, it won't turn out right. Okay, so with that being said, what's our last one we need? C? C is 3. It goes right here. And it's time to go get our answers. So let's go drop these into our Desmos Scientific Calculator instead of the other problem numbers. And we've got, let's see, -7, 2, and 3. So here we have -7. For A's, we have 2. And for C, we have 3. Okay, so this is the subtraction version. I highlighted it so you remembered that we can't do both that plus or minus sign. So this one's the subtraction one. When we subtract in our formula, we get 0.5 as our solution. So let's write that down. X equals 0.5. And let's go do the positive one. Okay, back over here. Plus, when we do an addition problem, we get an answer of 3. So over here, we get x equals 3. Box that in, and you are good to go. So let's see. Let's have you guys go try this out on your Desmos activity. And finding solutions is on slide 8. So let's have you go. Sorry, the slide numbers aren't quite correct anymore. Let's have you go try this on slide 8 just to make sure it goes okay. Go ahead and pause the video and then come back when you're done. Okay, welcome back. Last part is to actually figure out how to work through this problem and find solutions if you did have to show your work by hand on paper. So when you're looking at the formula, if you notice, this one's walking you through the order of operations step by step and asking you how you could actually find these. So if that's the case, then your job would be to understand these last two solutions. So the key is to remember our rule that the plus or minus sign means two solutions. One's from the positive side, one's from the negative side. So start by knowing your root. So in this one, our root is going to be 1. It's all filled in for you, and they've already done the simplification. They squared the -5, they multiplied the 4ac, they multiplied the 2a. It's all ready to just find the last step. So in this case, if the square root of 1 is 1, then your two solutions would end up being 5 plus 1 over 2 and 5 minus 1 over 2. Notice there's that x equals at the beginning. That's because you're finding x-intercepts. So it's giving you the number for x. So if you just remember that, then when you write your answers, they're always x equals. Okay, you're finding your x-intercepts. So add those two, divide by 2. 5 plus 1 is 6. Divide it by 2, x equals 3. Other one, 5 minus 1 is 4. Divide it by 2, x equals 2. Now, I know they're not always going to come out that nice and simple. You're going to end up with decimals sometimes, and that's okay. Remember, we can graph decimals. We just have to graph them in between the whole numbers. Okay? So the first things first, how are we going to do this? Step by step, you are going to fill in the quadratic formula. Use the quadratic formula. And then after that, you are going to take the root. And after that, you are going to write your positive and your negative equation. Notice I said equation. There is an x equals there. So that's why it's an equation, because there's an equal sign. And then at the end, last step, go through and find your solutions. Solve for the x intercepts. Okay, there you go. So there are your 4 steps that you would take to get through that problem. I can show you one more answer, and then I'm going to switch you back to your Desmos activity to do some extra practice. So this one here, this one's a bigger number one, which for some of you, I know that sounds scarier, but if you look carefully at it, they've got their A value being 1, B value being negative 12, and C is negative 28. So they've already done the filling in of the blanks, which was perfect, and they simplified as they went. The reason there's no negative here is because 2 negatives make a positive. So they've already done that simplification. If they would have shown all the work there, it would have looked like a negative 12, just so you know. Okay? And then the rest of it, they simplified as they went. Square the 12 inside the parentheses with its negative sign, multiply everything out. You end up all the way down here at the bottom where you can start by taking the root of 256. And if you're not sure, then go use your Desmos scientific calculator. It's no big deal. The square root of 256 is actually 16. So we're going to split this into a positive equation and a negative one. So we would get 12 plus 16 over 2 and 12 minus 16 over 2. 12 plus 16 is 28. And if you divide 28 by 2, you get that x is equal to 14. And then 12 minus 16 is negative 4. Divide it by 2, you get negative 2. And then we could just repeat the words of how we found them. I don't need to write that again. So the steps are up above still if you need to rewrite them yourself. Okay, so that is how to look at solving it by hand if you need to. At this point, I do want you to go back to your Desmos activity because I want you to practice a solution set, but there's also some special cases that aren't on this worksheet that you really need to go and check out to make sure that you are ready if it comes up with like a 0 there or a negative sign. What do you do with all of that? So go check out the last slides of your Desmos activity, which is going to be slides 8 through 17. Don't worry, there's not math on every single slide, but it walks you through some of those special cases to make sure that there's no surprises left for you. Okay, this is the end of your video lesson for today, so feel free to watch it as many times as you want. Pause it whenever you need to. You may use this to help you with your homework and email me if you guys have any questions. Otherwise, good luck with your Khan Academy and your worksheet.